Good morning, and we are going to be discussing Tera Nimue Kongming today. Part 2, Matchups. Primarily, this video is going to be focused on Ascent Akihabara. I'm going to be showing my deck list, my record. I'll be going over each of my matchups and how I play into them. And then we are going to be going over my sideboarding cheat sheet that I prepared for the event and my thought process in building it. And finally, we're going to close out with our PTM early observations. So without further ado, let's get started. As my deck list, you may notice that there are no copies of Dungeon Guide. The lack of Dungeon Guide is primarily explained by the dredging streams and the Naya and the Nimue package putting so much float into our graveyard that it actually is more intuitive to just level up to 3. This also lets us keep our float and spell count high for Naya hits. Naya is primarily in here as well to clear out the 2 toughness utility creatures like Hasty Messenger and Tidestone Bovine. Keeping them off the board will keep your opponent off of resources, which makes playing a longer game more palatable. Instead, let's start off with our round 1. Before we discuss our round 1, I'd like to go over the basic format. I have some observations about the matchup and perhaps some tips that I may be able to impart onto you, which is where a bulk of my discussion will focus. And on the right side, we have a couple of visuals. We have the visuals for the people who would like to know the champion and the spirit combination, as well as the favorability. The favorability is something that I made as a rough estimation of how the matchup goes, depending on which stage of the game you go. The 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 are the levels that you reach in each of the games. So at level 0 is usually on turn 0, and then level 1 is usually on turn 1 to 2, and then etc. And then as you get to 4, this is really just 3+. If the game goes later, who is more favored in the matchup? That being said, let's start off with our observations about Water Fractals. Water Fractals, you are ridiculously unfavored. At the start of the game, they neg a lot of tempo playing their Fractals, and you were able to commit on board. And the way you win these matchups is you take that early board lead and you convert that into enough pressure where they either have to respect your bodies on board or race you. And ideally, you just need to make racing you as unappetizing as possible. QSG Safeguard is something that helps prevent their big burst turns. And sometimes you're even forced to just slamming a Covenant of Thorns onto your own ally so that you force them to have Fracturize plus Burst Asunder or Fracturize plus Refracting Missile to actually kill you. That being said, if the game does go longer, you're actually not in a terrible spot. Except you're never truly favored in this matchup. You get to the point where you can maybe have a Covenant of Thorns on your ally, and you can try and extricating them down on resources, which is how my game 1 ended up going. But it's very swing. You could be dead on any single turn. That being said, I took out Dredging Streams and Seizing Edict. This is not really an attrition matchup, so the Dredging Streams don't matter nearly as much. And the Edict is obviously a fairly dead card. Expel the Departed and Blanche let you dramatically change the texture of the matchup, because not only can you trade down on their critical mass fractals, but you also get Blanche and a real answer to Burst Asunder outside of QSG Safeguard. That being said, let's go into our round 2. Round 2 is Tristan. Tristan is easily this deck's best matchup. You are fairly favored early on in the game, but this is probably one of the scariest times. Tristan can play Sadie, who's an ally who can be a bit of a headache to deal with, and they can threaten large slice and dice kills. However, we are not without options to combat this. One of the main ones is Wand of Frost. Wand of Frost is one of the MVPs against Slice and Dice. Slice and Dice usually comes in for 6 on the first half, and it's an on hit, meaning that if she doesn't deal damage with the Slice and Dice, then she doesn't actually get to copy it and get a second attack in. So if you're sitting with a Wand of Frost on board, and you're at level 2+, you can play a Coriolis Ward on whatever the Slice and Dice is targeting, and if you prevent the 3 damage, then you can activate the Wand of Frost. And then the Slice and Dice would be hitting for 0. This is absolutely phenomenal because it forces them to incapacitate Coriolis Ward, which puts that card at a premium as well. So not only do you have Ceasing Edicts, you have Coriolis Wards, and you have Taunt units, making it very hard for her to kill you through attack cards. That being said, Game 2 and Game 3, or potentially Game 1, depending on if she's on it, Regal Inquisition is probably the scariest card in this matchup, as it checks the powerful cards in your hand, like Coriolis Ward and Seizing Edict. So you are very scared of Regal. Additionally, because these games can often go longer and be stalemates, you might even be under threat of getting decked out by Regal Inquisition. So for that reason, I run Tabula and Stratagem inside the 4th Seizing Edict. But that being said, this matchup is pretty straightforward and pretty favorable, just because of how linear and is similar her win conditions are, right? Like if you have a deck configured to beat one win condition, you also beat her secondary win condition, which is really good. Now on to what I describe as kind of the opposite of Tristan, where Tristan has a very focused individual win condition. Merlin's very threatening because she has multiple win conditions that all attack you from slightly different axes. So she has Ghost of Pendragon, Sudden Steel. She can just attack for 4 damage with an inert sword every other turn. And she can threaten your Floating Memory. She can Ascension your Nimues. If she wants, she might be on Majestic Spirit. And she has Fireball. Now we have some fairly decent answers to some of these, but we will struggle into other ones. And then another big one is Cheshire Cat. So that being said, QSG plus Fan or QSG plus Wand can help you navigate the Merlin level 2 annoyance, where you might want to play into the board with your frogs or with your Nimues and your floating package, but you don't want to give her a free counter off level 2. You don't want to give the Merlin 2 value. So if you go QSG plus one of your 1-cost Draw Regalia and level on your first 2 materializations, it makes navigating the Merlin 2 a lot easier. Extricating Touch is probably best suited to hit Fireball or Ghosts of Pendragon, as these 2 are your biggest problem children. The favorability by game stage, an important thing to note in this one is that at level 3, Merlin committing 1 or 2 Pendragons to the table is your nightmare scenario. So being able to extricating them off of their Pendragons before they hit 3 makes their level 3 a lot less scary, and you can actually win a lot of games because they don't have that huge swing in tempo. At 3, that forces you onto the back foot, where she commands the pace of the game, and then fireballs you for lethal. So for the sideboarding plan, we're taking out a lot of the extraneous float. This is very on theme with not wanting to give the Merlin level 2 value, and we side in some answers to Fireball and some answers to Cheshire Cat. And this makes the matchup a lot more reasonable. But again, if you're getting triple Fireballed, you are going to lose this matchup. It's an unfavorable matchup, and you shouldn't beat yourself up about it. That being said, round 4, this is a lot like Tristan, where she's very one-note. her champion turns sideways, and your champion is very good against champions that turn sideways. But I'd argue Lorraine is an even easier matchup than Tristan, in the sense that Wand of Frost pulls double duty into Rending Flames, a lot like Slice and Dice. However, you are a Fracturize Lantern deck. So if she is on Rending Flames, then she gets absolutely destroyed by Fracturize plus Lantern. And your extricating touches are also a lot less overworked. You just extricating touch their Pendragon, and then they don't have a very scary level 3, and she just kind of falls over. Round 5, I was playing into Arisanna. This is a very even matchup. The favorability chart is a little bit misleading because Arisanna starts playing the game at level 3. And it's hard to illustrate that she hits level 3, but you're usually not hitting level 3 at a similar time because she just goes up there so quickly. But that being said, the game gets less and less favored as it goes on. She threatens a lot of damage. And your plan is to cut into that inevitability as much as possible. Having them shuffle in a smaller number of Cosmic Bolts is one of the better ways for you to do that. As if they have 8 or less in deck, the most damage a Cosmic Bolt can do is 18. And 18 is a manageable enough amount of damage because you can get piecewise recovery with Sempiternal Sage. And ideally, they're not even seeing all 8 anyways. And you're really only going to have to contest with maybe 6 if that's how many they shuffle on. But the scariest games are when Arisanna shuffles in so many Cosmic Bolts that you are just dead if the game goes longer. So really putting an emphasis on extricating touch their negates so that you can force through your Bagwas and your Sempiternal Sages and convert enough pressure to just kill her through all of her recovery. Sideboarding plan, again, very much the same note. Nimue and Frog do very little. Edict does very little. Expel the Departed puts a lot of work in against Fertile Ground, and Blanche puts in a lot of work against their burn damage and keeping your board clear. The opposite of keeping your board clear. You get to keep your board around while she wants to keep it clear. And Stratagem and Myriad Ice can represent a lot of damage in the later stages of the game. Which is important because sometimes she has a lot of healing to push through between Spirit of Serene Wind and 3 Visits. That being said, round 6, I played against Razorgale Kongming. Again, another volatile matchup. I don't think I won the matchup lottery at this event at all. I did most of my testing against the Rictus Tiding plus Acolyte of Cultivation build, and I hadn't actually tested against the Cloud Striker build that much. But in this limited sample size, the matchup is a lot better because they commit a lot more reserve into the board. Paying 5 for a Cloud Striker for it to get blown up by Nimue is a massive tempo swing, and it makes the matchup a lot easier. That being said, No Lantern for Cyclical Blaze and Safeguard Amulet for Tempest Downfall are going to be your best for Galleon. And keeping the board clear is generally the best way to play this matchup. There are some funny things that you can do as well. If they are more or less hands down trying to kill you with Tempest Downfall, and they activate a suppress effect on an ally, you might actually want to kill that ally that they're targeting, even if it's your own, so that you can actually threaten or strip away that suppress effect so they can't just free cast a pile of Tempest Downfalls and kill you. That being said, game 2, game 3 get a lot easier. Expel the Departed gives you a good answer to the Razorgale chip damage. And then Blanche gives you a good answer to either Razorgale pings or Tempest Downfall. And Dredging Streams and Naya are not phenomenal here. They're okay, but Naya doesn't actually kill any allies, and they are also a sensor deck. And Dredging Streams doesn't have a lot of targets. It's good into cyclical, but you're usually not upset to play turn either. Round 7, I ran into Seiryuu. This matchup is also a little bit volatile. You are mostly favored, but you do need to see Nimue plus Reprogram to actually get the Seiryuu off the table. QSC Covenant can make their life a little bit difficult, especially if you're extricating touching away their suppress effects like Baby Green. But for the most part, they have a lot of kill pressure on you if they go up to 3 a little bit early. And if the game goes later, you are more likely to see Nimue plus Reprogram, and you can just close the game out once their dragon is done. Sideboarding plan, very similar. We are very afraid of Lethal Inquisition because it makes lining up your combination against their dragon a little bit more difficult, which is something I did not run into consistently in testing. I don't think every dragon deck is on a pile of Regals, but it is something to be very cognizant of. You don't want to get decked out either, which is one of the only ways you can really lose a longer game. And Dredging Streams and Nullifying are not very good against most wind decks, which is a recurring theme. Round 8, I played against Clenny Boy on the feature match. We already went over this matchup, but if you'd like to check it out, I'll link the timestamp. And yeah, it's a very fun match. All right, round 9. Unfortunately, I went to time against a Goja Genbu player. This is a very even matchup. It's fairly volatile just because they'll try to side in their Expel the Departeds to get rid of a Fracturized Lantern. And so it doesn't actually matter if you Fracturize the Lantern, because they can actually just Fracturize plus Expel your Lantern and then kill you with Polar Depths. Polar Depths is 100% the scariest thing, and they have to find some way to deal with your QST Lantern. And much like Seiryuu, Nimue plus Reprogram beats the turtle. But since the turtle is just attacking in and not generating Arcane Blasts, just hiding behind taunt units is usually okay as well for the turtle. And that right there covers all 9 of my rounds on day 1. We started out 5-1, which is really good, but we ended up with 2 draws and a loss and did not end up making day 2. I conceded round 9 so that my opponent could make day 2, but I think it could have gone either way. Alright, and let's just quickly discuss my sideboarding cheat sheet for pre-Akihabara. Basically, I wanted to take notes on which cards I didn't like in each matchup, and then I wanted to figure out what the best way to put cards in that were live. You'll notice a couple of these things changed between the time of me making this document and the event itself. Like for Razorgale, I decided that Dredging was probably a worse card than Extricating Touch, which I think was a very good decision, and I think it paid off. But for the most part, this just kind of helped me figure out what the hole in my sideboard was. I wasn't sure if I wanted to play Stillwater Patrol at the event. It was kind of between, as you can see here, Stillwater Patrol, Mason Blast, and Resolute Stand for the wind and the fire decks, where Dredging Streams is a lot weaker against. But I did want to have something so that I wasn't getting ran over by Wind Wake Up, Fire, or Razorgale. And I also had a hole in the Merlin matchup because of how many slow float cards I wanted to side out. And so I decided to settle on Stillwater Patrol because she helped answer the stealth units from all those decks. Primarily Cheshire Cat, but also like Xiao Xiao as well. Alright, let's just go over my PTM early observations. Some of the key points are just that the Looking Glass decks gained Palvor, and I am very terrified of a 5/3 cat Additionally, Palvor is a bit of a pain point when you've got so much slow or delayed payoff floating memory, and I think it's at least worth considering reworking a good amount of the deck. And additionally, we did get Spalling Clones, which is another fast speed floating memory that we don't have to commit into the graveyard for very long. And it gives you a recovery tool, which helps you against some of the non-combat damage. But the two new decks, Merlin and Alice, I don't think they're that phenomenal. I think they might change the way we build decks a little bit, but I don't think they are as powerful as something like Old Merlin with Cheshire Cat. And the new rules change makes Gentle Respite and Extricating Touch really interesting. But that being said, thank you so much for watching. And please comment if you have any questions, and feel free to drop any observations of your own about the new format.